Welcome, folks. We are glad you are here tonight. We are here to talk about the continuing practices of our spiritual disciplines. Welcome for the December 2018, last of 2018 supper clubs. So just a reminder that we committed this year to doing spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices. The feedback we've received from many people is that this has been good and challenging, and people are actually engaging in some practices. A reminder of the definition of spiritual practices, spiritual disciplines. We'll start there. These are habits and actions of heart, mind, and body that help us connect with God, self, and others. Habits and actions of heart, mind, and body that help us connect with God, ourselves, and others. And I want to give again the definition of sin, just because sin is such a heavy word and can really throw us off when we hear that word. So I feel like every month we need to repeat how we define sin, or how sin is best defined, I should say. So sin is the thought or actions that separate us from God, ourselves, or others. So God, self, and others. So sin, that separation, takes us out of relationship, right? Creates a chasm for relationships. Tonight, we are talking about the spiritual practice of integrity.
Which goes really well with that definition of sin. It's so you can almost think of them as two ends of the. So when we're sinning, we're out of integrity. And we'll talk about a definition here. But it's interesting to even think about integrity as a practice, because we think about integrity as, I have integrity,
right,
or I don't have. Yeah, exactly.
You're
either a person of integrity or not. But I think really helpful to think about it as something that's a process of maturation, of spiritual growth.
Yeah.
We can become more integrous over our lifetime, and it's something we're always practicing, can be practicing.
So integrity is that root word of integer, right?
Yep.
One. So I think about integrity as alignment, right?
Yep.
We've talked about that, alignment, and so aligning what we do on the outside, our actions and our actions in the world, aligned with what's going on the inside, our thoughts and intentions.
You mentioned it, integer, so a whole number, to be whole, as opposed to a fraction, and to be fractured or fractions, right?
Fragmented.
To be in piece, fragmented, exactly. Yeah, so we're in pieces when we're not in integrity, when we don't have integrity.
That's interesting.
Yeah. What was it we were just talking about? If you have integrity, you're one person showing up, and otherwise you've got to keep different stories going, right? If you're fractured or fragmented.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's good. That's a good way of thinking about it.
So let's define it. So there's this sense of having some resonance between our inner life and our outer life, right? It's a way in which our actions and our speech are aligned, as you were saying, with what we believe and what we value in the world, what we want to be, who we want to be. And when those are in alignment, we feel a sense of integrity.
Right. Yeah. So the consistency, right? Characteristics of integrity would be consistency, that we are who we say we are, that we do what we commit to doing, that we are credible, right? I think this consistency of credibility and reliability creates a trustworthiness, maybe, that we become trustworthy by being and doing what we say we'll.
Showing up as the same person in different situations, so different people aren't seeing different people, or at different times, or even in that whole idea of, are you the same person in private as you are in public, right? When people can't see what you're doing, are you still doing what you would do if people were watching? And that's a sense of integrity. It's like,
that's true. It depends on the context. But
right. It's complicated, but it's a good question to be asking sometimes.
Yeah. So a characteristic of integrity would be honesty. So admitting that that we're not the same people all the time, that we aren't always in alignment. That's just the reality. That's the reality of sin in our lives, that we don't have that alignment all the time. And so to be honest about that, that's the liberating piece of integrity, is to say, I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I intend to be a person of integrity, but let's all admit it, we're not.
And life is complicated.
Yeah.
Good. So there's different ways of thinking about integrity in terms of our both, starting probably with our thinking, and then our speech, and then our actions. And maybe thinking is the kind of the foundation for our speech and our actions. And when that's not in alignment, that's, for example, you could, if we believe that if we believe in being compassionate and loving toward others, but in our minds we're having denigrating thoughts about others, negative thoughts, right? We're not in alignment with the person we are hoping to be, wanting to be. And then from that, then our speech can be,
comes forth.
Yeah, out of that same fractured, fragmented place. We're likely to say things that we would say we don't, it's not the person we want to be. So it's tough. I mean, so we're talking about gossip. We're talking about, complaining about someone behind their back. Things that keep us out of from being the person we would claim to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which it's that thinking, speaking, doing. Right. That all fit together. Yeah. So the benefits of living a life of integrity, or really being intentional about living a life of integrity, I think one of the benefits is that we are not in internal conflict or internal tension, or the kind of anxiety that it causes when you know that your outside life is not reflecting who you want to be on the inside. And so you live in this guilt or shame. And so there's freedom. If you're trying to live in alignment, there's a freedom and a relaxation about, I am who I am.
I think this is for a lot of us, we're walking around with a lot of guilt and shame, and we're not, feeling in alignment, and it affects our lives more than we think it does, I guess is what I'm saying, what I'm feeling.
So there's a burden there.
It's a burden that we carry around.
Yeah.
And then the more we do that, the more we align, our actions and our thoughts and our words, then we're also closer, we're more likely to be in a clean relationship with God as well. So it brings us closer to God.
And self. And others. Yeah. Right. The closer to God relationship, I appreciate that the manifestation of integrity would be what in Galatians the Apostle Paul called the fruit of the Spirit. So the fruit of the Spirit, you would see the fruit manifest in your life: joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness, and self-control, a self-discipline in our lives that says, I'm trying to align my inside and my outside. Okay, what about challenges to integrity?
Well, certainly you can, especially if we think that we are in alignment, or if we get a little legalistic about it, we can become actually end up judging others for their lack of being perfect, and it can turn into a kind of perfectionism.
Right.
That's we need to be careful about.
Very easy to be judgmental about other people's lack of integrity. Right. And I think integrity, one of the challenges too is the temptation to rationalize what we do. Well, I'm not really gossiping, I'm sharing how we could pray more for that person.
Right.
or something like that.
Exactly. And the third one we thought of was what we call works righteousness, the idea that by being a really good person, that God's going to love us more, or we're going to be more acceptable, that we're going to work our way into heaven. Kind of metaphorically.
Right. So it's kind of a moralism or a pietistic attempt instead of living in congruence with the inside and the outside. Well, we have some homework for you. First of all, we'd like you to spend 10 or 15 minutes recapping the practices that you chose, hoping that you chose a practice of prayer We gave some examples last month for prayer practices that maybe you've never tried before. So recap, did that work? Did you fulfill those? Did it transpire in your month? And then
Yeah, try
we have
some
some
things.
options.
So you could read the book of James in the New Testament.
That's in the Bible.
Yep, and it's actually full of kind of practical advice, guidance, and much of it works really well with the subject of integrity. So read that and see if there's a phrase, a verse or two that really strikes you, a particular, something more specific you can hone in on, and then practice that for a week. Take some notes and just see how it goes. What was challenging about that specific action for you?
Yeah. And the book of James, by the way, is only 4 chapters. It's brief. It's toward the back of the Bible and New Testament and toward the end.
Yeah.
And everyone should read it. I think everyone
true.
in the group should read the book of James. It's a great book to read and challenging.
Yep.
Taming your tongue.
Yep.
Try taming your tongue for 1 week. Really being intentional. That might mean a lot of silence for people like me. That adage, why am I talking? Wait, why am I talking? So taming the tongue, trying to be self-aware and self-conscious about holding back
Yep.
our words.
You could try to substitute an unhealthy behavior that you're already aware of in your life with a healthy one for a week, and lean into that place that's hard for you, and see how challenging that is.
Yeah, I think about social media, those kind of things that are just like small little addictions or
Yeah.
practices and habits that maybe this is the month you can kind of take
some practice with it.
Yeah, take a practice.
Fast
with it.
from those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Last
the-
one?
Yep. The examine is a kind of daily reflection that you do. You could do at the end of the day. We're going to put a link. We don't have enough time to unpack what this is, so we're going to put a link to we'll find a website. It's all over.
It's a practice of the
St.
Ignatian.
Ignatius. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, just a reflection on your daily interactions, where you saw God in your day, things you were grateful for, and things that are left undone that you take into the next day.
It's a great, simple but
practice.
very practical thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it, so
Yeah.
we'll put a link to that too.
Yeah, so you want to say again, recap tonight what?
Yes. So take some time to unpack how the last month was for you, right? And then you can do some thinking about like the practice of integrity itself. How do you think about it in your daily life? What's challenging for you?
How do you define integrity yourself
Yeah.
and what that means for you? And yeah, how do you practice it as a spiritual discipline? That's the hope.
And then go ahead and choose one of the things tonight and say, okay, I'm going to give this a try.
Everyone read James and
Yeah.
then pick another one.
There you go.
All right. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful Advent and good night.